I'm TonniLea, and this is TonniLea TV. And today I am so blessed to have Dr. Doug Weiss as my very first interview. I've gone through Dr. Weiss's recovery. I am still in recovery, and he has done an amazing job at helping those that were married to or are married to a partner of a sex addict, intimacy anorexic, narcissist, and he is here today to tell why he began this and what the journey has meant to him and what he does on a daily basis to help other people. So, Dr. Weiss, I am so glad that you accepted my invitation. This is a big honor for me.
Well, thank you, Tani, and me as well. I'm very excited about what you're doing, and I know your progress has been amazing, and you're helping others. It's fantastic.
And that's what it's all about, right? Is
Yes,
you
ma'am.
take what you have received and you just pass it on. Yeah.
That's
And
step
that's
12. I just did a whole series on step 12 last week. So yeah, that's
did you?
the yeah,
Yes.
that's what it's about.
Yeah, that's right. It is. So I know you are a licensed therapist. You are the executive director of Heart to Heart Counseling in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And I know you have seen people from all over the world. So you want to tell us a little bit about how that all began?
Sure. Well, I'm a recovering sex addict. I've been sober for 36 years, and that's proven by a polygraph. And we wrote our first book in 1992. We were on Phil Donahue. We've done Oprah, Dr. Phil, Good Morning America. We've done many shows and stuff like that, and written many books on sexual addiction, partner betrayal trauma, intimacy anorexia, married and alone, like the whole genre. We've covered quite a bit of a spectrum there. I think close to 50 books and probably that many videos as well. And I'm also the president of the American Association for Sex Addiction Therapy. So I certify counselors or coaches to work with sex addiction, partner betrayal trauma, or intimacy anorexia. And so we supervise them over, all over the country, all over the world. So it's been a great journey, and we see people get better. We do intensives here at Heart to Heart Counseling Center here in Colorado Springs, and people fly in every single week. I have a great team, myself and others, who do those intensives, and we see miracles most of the time. It really is amazing.
Yes, it is. I know, in the one group that Tori and I had on Wednesday night, we had one girl that her and her husband were able to work through things, and they are still together and working through and accountable. And we called her our
Mhm.
miracle girl. So it was amazing to see that. We didn't see that
Mhm.
in a lot of them because they chose to walk differently, but it was
Mhm.
amazing to see that within that young lady.
Yeah,
So
and
go ahead, Dr. Weiss.
I was going to say the miracle of recovery isn't always the marriage survives. Sometimes the marriage doesn't, but the miracle of recovery is people can be healed, and sometimes, and now a lot of times, I mean, probably in the highest percentage, most of them stay together, but that's not always the journey. And in the support groups, there's ladies who do both. They're trying to work through. Some are separated, some are divorced, some are healing after divorce, some are healing after the death and finding out about it. And so there's, variations of that. But, the journey is personal.
Absolutely. Yes. And the biggest thing I have learned is that you have to want to,
Hmm?
and that makes a big difference. It's just like with any 12 step. You have to want to heal yourself in order to really fulfill that journey and to become a greater person out on the other side. What tell us the story about how you started the whole thing, because you always inspire us ladies at the conferences with your story.
Well, I mean, my story is, I think very common for people that who have addictions. I was conceived in adultery. I was uh, placed in foster homes. I was sexually abused, and became addicted to pornography and self behavior early on, and then alcohol and drugs, and all of that kind of stuff. And then had a radical spiritual awakening at 19, but then still stayed in the sex addiction for a few more years until actually I went to seminary. And then I started getting sober, and I've been sober for 36 years. And we proved that. My whole team, we're probably the only counseling center in the world that the whole team of counselors voluntarily takes a polygraph to verify that they're sexually clean. You know, uh, that's not the case in a lot of places where the counselors who are even treating sex addiction are still active themselves. So I think the ladies really appreciate that they know that everyone that they're seeing, even the women, are are sexually clean. They don't have a double life, and it makes a big difference when you're counseling people not to have that cloud of secrecy and stuff that's going on in your own heart and life. It just makes a big difference not to do that.
Absolutely. Yes, I know that is one of the things that was most amazing to me is because everybody was held accountable.
Hmm?
So, um, so you're doing all kinds of new books, new videos. What's going on new at Heart to Heart?
Well, we do a lot of this. We do a lot of YouTubes. If they go to the Dr. Doug Weiss on YouTube, I mean, it's almost 400 videos on the whole thing: marriage, sex addiction recovery, intimacy, anorexia, married and alone. Our newest product comes out in about a week, and it's helping my spouse heal from my intimacy anorexia, which is like a 3-hour course, helping the man or woman who is the anorexic actually help their spouse heal. Instead of being part of the problem, they can be part of the solution, and gives them lots of tools. I mean, it's 3 hours long, so that's kind of like a course. But we're regularly putting new stuff out there, and our YouTube is, I don't think, there's about 4 million views or close to it. So people are getting help, and we love that, and they're getting a lot of free information, and then sometimes they step into more information, and they really get their lives changed.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of your different 12 steps that you have? I know I went through three of them, and I tell you what, every time I went through them, I found that God was just, bringing out more and more things. So,
Sure. I mean, every time you go through steps, it's a great thing. So, I mean, our
mhm.
first step book was a 12-step for sex addicts. Then we did a 12-step for partners of sex addicts. Then we did a 12-step for intimacy and anorexia, a 12-step for um, married and alone. And we also have books and stuff for female sex addicts, but we didn't do a step book for them because they can use the regular sex addiction one. And then we also have partner betrayal trauma, which is when a woman's been experienced either sex addiction from her husband, or intimacy anorexia from her husband, or infidelity. And you would think that those statistics would be different, but they're actually usually within 1 or 2% of each other. So the trauma of neglect is the same as the trauma as infidelity. And so we have a 12-step workbook for them as well, and workbook and book. So, we've been doing a lot of different nuances in this field that need to do the 12 steps. I mean, whether you're a partner or the addict, you need to be powerless because you are. and and once you can
Absolutely.
accept that you are, then that helps your life a whole lot.
Is is that kind of why you decided to use the 12 steps as a recovery process, or what made you decide to use the 12 steps?
Well, they work. It's just that simple. We have workbooks for all those topics as well to give them more tools. But the actual recovery process, I mean, basically what the 12 steps does, when someone's an addict, oftentimes their mistrusting has been flipped. So they don't trust people, they don't connect to people, and they use things, objects, or people to act out with to medicate. And what the 12 step does, I mean, first it connects you spiritually, which is really good news to know that you're not God. And so it's really a big burden being God when you're not, right? And so
Right.
it alleviates you of that burden. And then it takes you through uh, where you start, turn your will of God. Then you start doing your own search in yourself, finding out the stuff that, that's on your side of the street. But then the rest of it, you have to start trusting others. And in the groups that we do, they start trusting others right away. They make phone calls, they start connecting to people, they start working it. Well, once you start trusting people, you can start healing.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what the major thing that the 12 step does. It allows you to reintegrate trust of people. And for valid reasons, a lot of addicts and partners, their trust has been violated. And so they do have those feelings, and rightfully, legitimately so. But to heal, you can't heal from a place of mistrust.
Yeah. It is definitely something that you learn to do by that daily connection with others, that's for sure. Because
Mhm.
it does build it up, and you know that those are the people that you can trust. Like you said, because you've been betrayed and that trust is no longer there.
Mhm.
So, yes. What type of advice would you give to some women that are in a marriage right now where they're dealing with the issue of either a sex addict or intimacy anorexic. Which, when you tell people that term, maybe that's where we'll start first. Because I tell that term to a lot of people and they look at me like, well, what does that mean? So
Hmm.
I know that that's kind of a phrase you came up with. So you want to
Yeah.
explain that one?
Yeah, we actually trademarked that because it really captures the whole essence of it. Intimacy anorexia is the active withholding of spiritual, emotional, and sexual intimacy from your spouse. Everyone else thinks you're wonderful. Okay. But when you go home, your spouse feels very alone. They feel disconnected. There's this absence of intimacy in several dimensions. I mean, oftentimes there's very little to no romance. There's very little sensuality, which is that touch without sexual motivation. There's a dryness in your heart because you're not being seen or heard or celebrated, and it can deplete. It can kill a marriage over years. I mean, it's kind of a process, but as people move to the 20-30 year mark, it can kill a marriage pretty quickly. But the intimacy anorexia is actively keeping yourself so busy that you're too busy for your spouse. You blame your spouse for all the problems in the marriage, so you almost never say you're wrong or you're sorry. You limit or withhold love, especially the way they want it. Limit or withhold praise. Limit or withhold spiritually. Limit or withhold sex, or you're disconnected during sex. You're unwilling or unable to share your feelings with the other person. You use anger or silence as a way to control. You have ongoing or ungrounded criticism towards them. Sometimes they control around money, but often the spouse feels like a roommate. And if you're listening to me and you're like, oh, ma, I got a handful of those in my relationship, you should probably look up intimacy anorexia. And, we own that space. So there's a lot of support and help for that. But you don't have to be married and alone. And I'm not sure what your other question was. I forgot it.
Of just what you would tell someone that if they're, in a marriage or they have gone through the marriage, from a partner that was a sex addict or the intimacy anorexic.
Oh, yeah. Well, the first thing I tell all partners is it's not your fault. Whether the addiction, whether it's a sexual addiction. I mean, I've done probably over 5,000 sex histories with men and women. And the sexual addiction population almost always starts, I mean, in the 90 percentile, starts in adolescence. Okay. So that was 5, 10, 15 years before you met them. So you're not responsible. And it's not about you not being enough. It's not about you not being a good lover. It's not about your wrinkles, the color of your hair, how much weight you've gained. It has nothing to do with any of that. They would have done this whether they were married to someone who they consider to be perfect in every way because they're addicts. Okay, that's what they do. And on the intimacy anorexia, I would also say the same thing. You're not to blame for being neglected. It's not your fault that they won't reach out and connect to you. It's not that you're not attractive, that they're pushing you away spiritually, emotionally, or sexually. It's because of who they are that they're doing that. Now, if they want to get help and support, there's lots of tools they can do that. Not everyone does. Some people choose to keep drinking the bottle, whatever their bottle is, and they will destroy marriage after marriage in the wake of their lifespan, and it's really tragic. But I would say to the partner that just because you didn't cause it doesn't mean you don't need to heal from it. Okay, you might not have been driving when you got hit by a car, but you probably need to go to physical therapy if you've been hit by a car. Okay, and that's where some partners go, well, I'm not doing it, so I don't have a problem. No, you have a problem because you're married to someone who's 14 years old for 20 years. Okay, and you've been hurt and you haven't been living in a healthy situation. Oftentimes, their ability to dream stops. There's a lot of side effects that we've researched with this stuff: PTSD, depression, weight gain, lower sexual self esteem, and it goes on and on. How a partner is factually, statistically damaged because of the other person's addiction to withholding in intimacy anorexia or their addiction to porn or others, whatever they're doing. And so the partner has to accept that they've had some damage, and that damage is going to take them getting in a group and working their steps and doing the process to accelerate their healing. Could they heal long term? Maybe, but why waste 10 or 15 years when you can get it done in months or a year of really doing some hard work?
Yeah, and that's it, is that you have to choose to do that work for sure. Um, and I hope these are the right words to say, but I'll have some ladies, that I do in my group, and they don't want to continue on with the stuff. And I'm like, but you need to remember, yes, it does hurt, but you're not there anymore. You are
Hmm.
now moving to a safe place. You're not in that.
Hmm.
And to become a stronger woman, I know, that is, for me, that was so very, very important. Now I can't make that for everybody else, but I can show them, right? Um,
Hmm.
Dr. Weiss, what do you think causes, or what have you seen are a lot of the causes of why men and women are addicted to sex or their intimacy anorexic? Because there's
Well,
always the bottom.
yeah, no, for the sexual addict, I mean, in the upper 80 percentile, they've been sexually abused. Well, that makes sense. They were used as a sex object. They were disconnected. They were traumatized, and they're repeating the trauma. Most of them have experienced emotional or physical abuse in their family of origin. Okay, so that makes sense too. They need to medicate because of their pain. Some people become sex addicts neurologically because when they do have a sexual release, they get these endogenous opiates, it's the prefrontal cortex of their brain, and boom, they literally glue to whatever they're looking at. And so, ring the bell, feed the dog, ring the bell, feed the dog, ring the bell, feed the dog. You do that a thousand times or more, you're going to want whatever that bell is. And so, they get addicted chemically to the reinforcement schedule. They actually hijack their sexual reinforcement schedule to an object world. And so there's that. Um, for the intimacy anorexia, the same thing. Sexual abuse is real common. The other thing is with their family of origin, usually they're cross-gender parents. So if they're a man, their mom; if they're a girl, their dad is really disconnected, abandonment, or just they're physically there, but they're not emotionally there, and so they have no real skills in attaching. Okay, which is legit. Sometimes it's role model neglect. They see their parents not loving each other, and they think that functionship is really what marriage is. It's not about relationship, again, because they don't have the template for that. And oddly enough, sexual addiction by itself can cause intimacy anorexia, because if someone is attaching to a fantasy world where you have no emotional skills to get your pleasure, and then you marry someone who requires emotional skills to get pleasure, you will avoid that person because it takes so much work as opposed to over here. And so sex addiction itself can actually create an intimacy anorexic. And when they're both together, they have to heal both at the same time. They can't heal one or pick one. They need to heal both. They need to be connected more to their spouse, and they also need to heal the sexual addiction. If they can do both, I've seen thousands of couples get better. It's not where you start. Like in the recovery process, it's where you go from where you start. And anyone can heal if they decide to do the work.
Right. And Dr. Weiss, that is what I love about what you did, well, with all three of those books, because in the partners, you deal a lot more with the sex addiction and stuff, but you also bring in that intimacy anorexic. And then
Mm-hmm.
with Married and Alone, which is kind of more towards the intimacy anorexic, but you bring in the sex addiction as well.
Mm-hmm.
And with the betrayal and trauma, which was the last one I did, I mean, you just cover everything with that. So, yeah. So in today's society, there's no reason to stay sick or to stay damaged and hurt. But as you say, it does come down to a choice, right?
Well, and the choices are sometimes the choice, especially for women, the choices are somewhat more complicated. Sometimes it's a choice of getting better or not, which is always a choice.
Hmm.
Sometimes women stay for reasons that have nothing to do with the person being sober or not sober.
Right.
And they have to unwind that for themselves
Hmm.
as to, you're not staying because of him, you're staying because of you. And we have a great video like, why do I stay when it doesn't make sense? Because they need to know, like, they're not staying because sometimes why they think they're staying or why they tell others they're staying. And they need to unravel that, because sometimes that can keep them from their journey of recovery, because they fear, Tawny, if I actually get better or get a job or grow up in some way that I'm not willing to grow up, then I might be strong enough to leave. So I don't want to leave. So I don't want to get stronger. So sometimes they avoid the whole recovery process because the outcome, they can see the outcome. He doesn't grow up. I do. I change. He doesn't. I may not want him. Well, I'm not sure I want to go through all that work. to end up divorced. So let's not do any work.
Makes perfect sense, right?
Let's just stay in the system and complain and, point fingers at him and why he's not changing. And I call it the hot potato change. He won't change, right? So he throws the potato back to her. She was not going to change in areas that she doesn't want to change. So she throws it back to him to change. And this can go on for decades. And so they can stay stuck indefinitely.
Right. And that, for me, that just seems so sad, but for others, you can understand why they want to be there. But what I love too, Dr. Weiss, is that you say no matter what your decision is, you can still heal from it and become a stronger person. And
Absolutely.
so, yeah, you want to
And
elaborate on that a little too?
well, I would definitely encourage men or women, no matter if it's the addict and or the partner, and there are female addicts and there's men who are partners, that they do address the things that they need to address, so that they can have the highest quality of life possible. You only get one shot, and to relegate it to someone else's issue, I'm not sure is the wisest thing to do. Sometimes a couple will be talking and one of the spouses is really upset at the other one. I go, well, they're 14 years old. Like, why are you upset that they're 14 years old? They've been doing this for 20 years. I know they're 44 to you, but they're only 14 emotionally, spiritually, morally. So they keep making the same decision at a 14-year-old state, right? That may not change. And so if they don't do the work, it won't change. So then it would be your work to decide what you want to do. And that's sometimes a dilemma, like when it turns to, oh, I've got to change.
Well, and then we still got to just go back to that step one, right? We're powerless over
Mhm.
anyone but ourselves. And
That's right.
we're powerless over ourselves except because of Christ.
Mhm. Now,
Dr. Weiss, I'm sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
I was just going to ask what, because I have noticed this just by, talking around here in my community and stuff. What do you think is the biggest issue that churches do not want to deal with this?
Well, I think, churches are largely led by men. Okay. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm all for women pastors, I'm all for it, but just statistically, more men are pastors than women.
Mhm.
And so men avoid things they're not good at or they're not trained at. Okay. So if they're not trained in fixing cars, they don't lift up a hood.
Right.
They just don't. Okay. And I have an MDiv. They didn't teach me how to treat sex addiction or intimacy anorexia or even fix marriages. They were just teaching me how to, preach and to exegete and to run Sunday school programs and stuff like that. So
Hmm.
I think a lot of it is a lack of understanding. We did a survey a long time ago, probably over 20 years ago, with over 1,400 or 14,000 pastors. I don't remember which, and we asked them, if someone in your church approached you to do a support group for sex addiction, would you be willing to let them do that? It was like 94% said yes. So it's not the problem that the pastor is unwilling to let someone else do it. They just don't feel called to do it themselves because they don't have the skills to do it. But I've been in churches all over the world, and I would stand up with men and then say, okay, now how many of you feel like you need a group? And there'd be, okay, those. And I say, how many of you are willing to lead a group? And there'd be those. In every church, there's someone willing. So either the pastor needs to initiate that conversation, or if it's your burden, you need to initiate it. And if you're a partner, you can initiate that relationship. You don't need permission to start a partner group.
That's right.
you know and so we have a TV show now called Healing Time, and we encourage people to start groups of all kinds of types, because you don't need permission to open your home and have 6 or 8 people go through some curriculum, so that they can get a better life in some way. And I think if we get that approach, but it's not the pastor's fault. He hasn't been trained and he's not called to it. It's the people in the church who someone's not responding to that need. And usually they're, I'm so ashamed, can't tell anybody. And so they all stay stuck together instead of all healing together.
Mm. Yeah, I just know from the personal experience that, there were several of them that said that, they didn't need it in their church. And so, and all you can do is just, say it and leave it at that and leave it in God's hands, right?
Right. I
But
remember when I first started, there was churches would constantly say, "Well, we don't have that problem." But after the internet, they start calling me because it's a big problem. You have 14-year-olds with porn stores. You have 8-year-olds with porn stores in their pocket called a cell phone, their iPads, and stuff like that. We've got to get serious about trying to heal our communities from this. Otherwise, we're going to be, I have job security for sure, but I mean, it's going to take an army to heal the amount of people that are being moved towards the sexual addiction cycle that our culture seems to want to be on.
right, because if you have one that is an issue, either the husband or the wife, and then you probably see it go on within the generation, right? Just
It
like
can definitely stay in families because they're dysfunctional. So when someone has any addiction, they stay adolescent. So when you're raised by an adolescent, it's dysfunctional.
right.
Okay, so then you have to medicate your dysfunction or the dysfunction you're experiencing, and so you pick something as well, and you might pick something different than mom and dad, but you'll pick something.
Yeah, but you'll pick something. Yeah, alcohol, drugs, eating, something like that, right?
Facebook,
Facebook, yes.
television, yeah, all
Yeah,
kinds of stuff.
yeah. Well, Dr. Weiss, I am so honored that you accepted this invitation, and I really, really do appreciate you. I appreciate what you are doing in the community.
Mhm.
I see you everywhere, which is amazing. God is really, really using you. And that's just another sign of that He takes all of the broken pieces, all of the
Mhm.
ashes, and He makes good from it, right? So,
Absolutely. And if anyone here, in our voice wants to get help, they should reach out to you and get some information because you can help them. You've been on your own journey and you've got a lot of hope to share. So keep doing and proud of you for what you're doing. And I'm excited for what's going to happen in your future.
well, and it's just that, I decided I was not going to be a victim anymore. I was not going to do that because I know, and finding out who TonniLea is. And,
Mhm.
you know, I tell everyone, Dr. Weiss, that had it not been for your program, I probably wouldn't have survived because I
Mhm.
was so broken from, divorcing him just to find out and remarrying him just to find out that that affair still had gone on. There was a lot of trauma and it was, lots and lots of stuff that accumulated, and I was so glad to get rid of it. And
Mhm.
and
Good.
every time that you go through the 12 steps, God just shows more things that need to be cleaned up and done. And so, but I am so glad that you accepted this, and I wish nothing but the greatest and God's blessing over your ministry and all that you are doing.
Well, thank
You
you
have
very much.
anything? You have any words of encouragement for any of these listeners?
Any listener, there's hope no matter if you're the addict or the partner, but you have to take the step, reach out and get some help and get in a group, do the steps, do the work.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Weiss. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.